All right. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Good evening, everyone. My name is Mabel Elmore. I'm the MLA for Vancouver-Kensington and chair of the Special Committee to review passenger-directed vehicles. I'd like to acknowledge that we're meeting this evening on the traditional territories of the Lekwungen peoples, now known as the Songhees and Esquimalt nations. The committee is reviewing passenger-directed vehicle services, including taxis and ride-hailing, administered under the Passenger Transportation Act. The committee is currently holding a public consultation to inform our work, including a number of public meetings. We are also accepting written input until next Thursday, November 30th. Information on how to participate can be found on the committee's website, www.leg.bc.ca/CMT/PDV. For this evening's meeting, every presenter will have 15 minutes for their presentation, followed by 15 minutes for questions from committee members. I'll now ask the committee members to introduce themselves, starting with our Deputy Chair.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'm Shirley Bond. I'm the MLA for Prince George Valemount.
And I'm Jordan Sturdy, the MLA for West Vancouver Sea to Sky.
And I'm Janet Rutledge. I'm the MLA for Burnaby North.
I'm Kelly Green, MLA for Richmond Steveston.
And assisting us this evening is Karn Riar and Alexa Neufeld from the Parliamentary Committee's office. And backing us up with Hansard Services is Amanda Heffelfinger. Okay, and I'd like to welcome our first presenter. We have here with us Janet Erickson from the Canadian Federation of the Blind. Okay, Janet, over to you. You have 15 minutes.
Thank you so much for allowing me this opportunity. When I talk to you this evening about my experience with hailing taxis and riding in them, it is only about one part of my life. I use black and white thinking for this subject to make myself understood. It is a more difficult part of living, as being blind is not my fault, and being a woman is how I was born. I used a taxi with a guide dog for 40 years. I have never had what I consider a normal taxi ride like my sighted family take for granted. Because I am blind and a woman, I have been egregiously taken advantage of by taxi drivers choosing to interact with me as if I knew nothing. When I am riding alone in their cars, they've had their training on helping people with disabilities entering, riding, and exiting their vehicles. And every time I take a taxi, I am emotionally assaulted with questions and their assumptions about being blind. In their minds, I have never traveled to Europe in an airplane. I've never been in a boat. I've neither ridden a bike nor a horse. I've never tried to drive a car on my own in 1985 with a sighted friend beside me, directing me, seeing if I could be a blind driver. I've never shopped for beautiful dresses at a department store. When I sit in a cab, I might as well be living in the Victorian era wearing my bustle and wearing my corset, as well as attending Langley Fundamental Baptist Church all day, every Sunday. Their attitudes of pretend curiosity making me feel emotionally trapped, as if the era where blind people and women stayed at home with their families was being revived by them with a vengeance. riding in those cars, I would keep being conditioned by them to learn to be frail, helpless, and hopeless. Unlike that era they put me into, when I'm in their cars, I have lived in Coquitlam, Kelowna, Langley, and Victoria. The worst place to live and face this province-wide discrimination of being blind and being a woman when hailing a taxi is in the Fraser Valley area of Maple Ridge, Surrey, and Langley, where my name might as well be Jezebel, not my original name. I would be driving alone with them or with my daughter when I would receive questions that made me feel dehumanized after the ride. It took emotional work to normalize these conversations with my answers so I could feel human. I relived the horror of their repeated invasive questions. I'd be asked, "He's a good dog, eh? How long have you been blind? Who gives you money? Do you work? Who helps you with your clothes? Does someone dress you? Who looks after you? How much money do you get a month? How much is your house worth? How much does your dog cost? Who pays for your dog? Do you live alone? Oh, do you go to church? Oh, you're a good girl." I was also congratulated by this hypocritical morality by them that I was a good girl while driving in a cab and enjoying my daughter's company. We were told to be quiet by the driver. It's much harder to have emotional boundaries because I'm in a more dependent situation with these drivers as I'm in a more physically confining space. I was also a victim to and exposed to the darker side of this industry. My sighted family would never experience because they can see, and because unfortunately Canadian values of middle class politeness work for sighted Canadian men and sighted Canadian women, except late at night when many of them had a bit too much of a good time. With being blind and being a woman, those same Canadian values only lead me to being abused, and the denial of this abuse by the taxi industry and my sighted family is unconscionable. A past example is while living in Langley, I was getting myself well and making good choices to keep going in my life to eventually work. I walked with my guide dog and visited my daughter's friends' parents. I also made sure that my daughter had a good school life. One day, I was walking home with my guide dog after dropping my daughter off at school when a taxi driver I had known for a couple of years drove me to my house and tried to give me his private phone number. I took the ride with him because it was raining. He told me repeatedly I could get a ride if I called his private number. As a Canadian, I was very naive. I waited a couple of months and called the man on Christmas Eve. I innocently thought just to have a chat. The chat turned into take-turn telephone calls. Then with him, He wanted to take me to restaurants and shows because he was lonely and wanted someone to be with him because his wife died 3 years before. He would come to the house and give me takeout food for a couple of weeks, even at the time of the Lorry Festival after the food. I faced sexual assault by this driver. He metaphorically threw me away as if I had no life value as a woman. I was given his cultural morality about how wonderful he was and how civic-minded he was, doing good for the community, getting his car repaired at a local mechanic shop on the 200th block in Langley. I was used as a tool for his virility so he could find a wife later on. He talked to his son about chasing women down. This horror took place even though I was raising a child on my own with her grandmother and sister and learning to get better with doing paperwork for the Pacific Training Center for the Blind as one of their board members. My family does not understand the ramifications of why I find taking taxis so emotionally horrendous and so difficult. I don't want to ever see my male family members again because the influence of the taxi industry's treatment of me as a woman with blindness and their tacit acceptance of this influence in my life makes me feel extremely unsafe around them and the taxi drivers. I have to be the strength to do self-defense to feel safe again. Yes, one could say that the family and the taxi industry are two different subjects. Although I can't drive the point home enough that having the license to tacitly ignore the taxi industry's discrimination of me and other blind people using guide dogs who simply want to live life leads me to no other choice than to never support a sighted family who quietly upholds my being abused by this industry. I'm simply a person who is trying to live like everyone else in BC. My blindness is made more manageable when I am spoken to positively, and my strengths as a human being are supported and celebrated. And I think, and I could go on about having to wait much longer for rides and having my dog constantly thought of as a pet, not a guide dog, not a service dog. I could even tell you about a cab driver that wouldn't accept me because I had a dog, and I told him, look, I'll phone the police if you do that again. And I mean, this has been my life over the past number of so many years. And so people could say, yes, there are some nice drivers, but they tend to be, but it's so frustrating. I never know what I'm going to meet up with. I have tried sitting quietly in the car. That has not often worked because there would always be a question. And as I reiterated before, boundaries are really difficult in situations like this.
Thank you, Janet. You've got 2.5 more minutes if you want to share, if you want to share some more experiences or
I think-
whatever you'd like to say.
I think what I'd like to say is that that there has to be far longer and far more extensive training on the strengths of people that have disabilities, whether they use a dog or not. It's not just seeing a film. It is not just filling worksheets out and writing questionnaires about how you would respond as a person with a disability. It's someone else's lived experience. And the fact that the taxi industry so egregiously, in a big picture sense, just takes away the Canadian values of being polite, being centered. It's so horrible. It just, and the denial when I don't have a good ride. I mean, I think if there could be a lot more counseling support when people are harmed by this industry, and I did report the abuse to the taxi industry that I had faced, but whether they do something or not is far beyond me. It was just the horrendous staring I got from many of the taxi drivers. I sometimes I was not as well when I lived in Langley as I am now, but when I was there, I felt like there were some taxi drivers staring at me, and I just couldn't shake it. There was no one there to talk to about this, especially in the Fraser Valley. And I think that there has to be a lot more correction on this, because as I say, even now, I walked here because I want to have confidence. I love feeling good. My dream is to be able to transfer that feel to the taxis and get the same taxi ride as anybody else that can see, having confidence, feeling good.
Thank you, Janet. That's right on time. And first of all, I'd like to really thank you for taking the time and having the courage to come and join us, share your experiences. Yeah, I'm really sorry to hear about the negative experiences that you've had. You don't deserve to be treated that way. And so now I'd like to open it up for questions from committee members. And if you could introduce yourselves. Kelly, go ahead.
Thank you. Kelly Green, MLA for Richmond-Steveston. Thank you for sharing your experiences. We've heard similar things about, issues with guide dogs, especially.
Yes.
I was hoping to get, or if you have any information or experiences with ride hails as well, so that we can have a bit of comparison. Understandably, not everybody uses ride hails.
No, I don't. I'm sorry, I don't like a ride.
Like Uber or Lyft.
I can only do those in the States, so I don't. I just, it was a way better experience with the one Uber time I did have in the States.
Okay. Is that it, Kelly?
No. Would you be able to, was there any particular thing that happened during your Uber trip in the States that stands out to you as like a best practice?
A best practice was, I wasn't asked about being blind. There were no questions. I mean, I had no identity, if you will. I just traveled. I just went from point A to point B, and that was all.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we also have, and joining us, Janet, hybrid zooming in, is Doug Routley. He's on the screen with us here, and he's got his hand raised. Doug, to you, and please introduce yourself. Go ahead.
Yeah, Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you for your presentation. My name is Doug Routley, and I'm the MLA for Nanaimo, North Cowichan. And I appreciate your contribution and your candor. You said that you thought drivers needed a deeper appreciation of those who use dogs, and then you said that more than just watching a video. And so that's intriguing because, you know, it has a parallel to some of the things we heard that Commissioner Donald was about, how officers who had a deeper empathy for the community were, you know, had better results, better outcomes. And so I wonder if there's any, if you can expand on that, what would you see as a good way of translating or transmitting to people that deeper understanding?
I think to translate a deeper understanding is those that are comfortable. See, we have to look at comfort level here, and those that are willing can walk around the driver's work facilities, for instance, you know, because of my exposure to this industry, the garages and the offices, and just be in the car lot with them, working with a guide dog, and really live. I think it's about relearning to really appreciate living. This is a living relationship, and I think as videos are wonderful, but to see a living relationship that is a little bit beyond the car, for instance.
Doug, do you have a follow-up? You're on mute.
Oh man, I guess it's been a while, hasn't it? But yeah, thank you. If I could, I wonder if organizations that train the dogs and also our advocates have made that kind of linkage, because it seems like a really an area where things could be improved if people had that kind of more empathetic exposure to how life is for people who do rely on dogs. So maybe the committee could think about how we can help existing organizations play a role in making that better for people.
I think a lot of it is you have privacy issues too. We just simply want to be able to take, you know, we don't want to have to do this, really. I mean, I don't want to go to a, like really, I would just love to wave for a cab like everybody else, stand there, enjoy my dog, and just get in the car, go and pay the fare and be out. So having said that, it's really balancing the privacy of the people with the with doing this type of living with somebody or you know, showing what it's like to have a guide dog and be with a guide dog.
Thank you very much.
Okay, other comments here? Shirley, go ahead.
Thank you, Janet. It's Shirley. And I just want to thank you for sharing your personal story. And I'm very glad that you did report the circumstances that you faced. That's incredibly important. And I think that, Doug asked some really important questions. We're talking about training being very different on a video than it would be having, drivers actually have some hands-on, in-person type experience. So I think that is a very practical suggestion that you have talked about. We've also heard from others that they have had because it is a human right that you do not have to indicate when you are asking for a ride with a taxi that you have a guide dog, that
Yes.
you don't have to do that. Have you had circumstances, we've heard from others, that taxi drivers will arrive and then when they find out that you have a guide dog, they will deny you a ride? Have you experienced that?
I have experienced that, and I am fully on board with what other people that are blind have said. It is a human right to just be able to, like sighted people out on the town, just get a cab. It's also, I can also add to, it's also a human right not to ask if they should also learn that they have to ask if they can ask questions. You just, gosh.
I think that's absolutely correct. I think about my experience. I often use taxis to get from the building to the airport, and I think it would be rare that there would be a series of questions. They might ask what I do or who I am or where I'm going, but it's certainly not a stream of questions about my life or who I am, those kinds of things. So I think you're absolutely right. You have the right to ask for a ride in a taxi and just enjoy that ride like anyone else. So I really appreciate the perspective you've brought tonight, and I like our chair. I feel very sorry that you've had to go through so many negative circumstances, but I can tell you this, I don't know, you said, and I wrote it down, I don't know who would ever consider you frail, helpless, or hopeless. You are none of those things, and you came today with you are very articulate, you laid out your concerns. I certainly would never use those words, and I just want to thank you for having the courage to come tonight and tell us your story. It will help us shape the recommendations that we make. So thank you for your time. I so appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much, because I've always wanted to speak, and it means a lot to me, because boy, I would, the Langley's in a way a second place because of family there, but it would be wonderful to go to a place in Langley with no questions asked.
Yes.
And I think really in the Fraser Valley, I cannot emphasize enough that there has to be twice the length of training as the rest of the province. I just can't.
Janet, this is Mabel, and I want to just echo the remarks from our other committee members here and thank you for coming and sharing your experiences. They're difficult, and your perspective is really important, and you're very articulate in terms of your experience as someone who uses a guide dog, but also a woman, and that analysis. So that really brings an important perspective to our work, and I think a very deep analysis in terms of what training means. We've heard, in a number of presentations over many days, the importance of training for to understand the continuum of people with disabilities, and I think the way you talk about it, not just watching a film, but really understanding and internalizing and changing those attitudes and really being grounded in respecting, your humanity fully is very profound. So I take that to heart, and I think that it's, just a very powerful. It's a very powerful presentation. So
Thank you.
I want to thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And like I say, my dream is that anyone that either acquires or is born with a disability does not face that level of negativity when you're making really good, when you want to make really good choices.
We've got 3.5 minutes left for our question period, Janet.
Sure.
And Jordan would like to ask a question.
Sure.
Jordan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and again, thank you, Janet, for sharing your story. But to follow up a little bit on what Kelly was beginning to talk about earlier, you said you took a ride-hail trip in the United States, but you haven't tried it here. Why? What are the obstacles to trying it here? And maybe share a little bit with us there.
The obstacles are, I have to live, eat, sleep, and work and all that. And B, I just, I don't have any info in alternative formats for myself personally about ride hails, so.
So you don't really feel like you have the information to be able to access it in a effective way or a simple way for you?
Not yet, no.
Is it an app? Is that part of the barrier?
Well, part of the barrier is the app, and part of it is I don't really know anybody that can't see that does ride hail. Okay, the other barrier is, it takes a level of planning to access anything accessible. It sounds bizarre, but you have to really be calculating and plan ahead to oh goodness, and also you have to move past the feel of overwhelm.
Calling a cab is just easier.
It is easier, and it's harder, as I say, because I never know what's the next set of personal questions. I mean, I can even say, when my daughter and I got beautiful coats, we got comments about our coats, so God.
All right, okay. Janet, I want to thank you very much for your presentation, and on behalf of the committee, we really appreciate you taking the time to share your experiences with us.
Well, thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to take a 2-minute recess while we get ready for our next presenter, so I'll ask Cancer to take us off air for a short recess. Go live or just, okay, here we go. We're back. All right. Hi, Corey. My name is Mabel Elmore. I'm the chair of the committee. Welcome. Very pleased you're joining us from the city of Calgary. And you've got 15 minutes for your presentation. Then we'll open up to 50 minutes for question and answer. It's over to you.
Awesome. Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity. I believe I did send my slideshow. Do you guys all have that on your tablets?
Yes, we have it, and we can also do screen sharing if you want.
kind of having issues with my computer. So I
Okay,
do
we've got access to it. It's a good presentation.
Perfect.
Go ahead.
Perfect. So my name is Corey Porter. I'm the Deputy Chief of Vehicle for Hire within Calgary, Alberta. And I'm here virtually today to provide an update on our Wheelchair Accessible Vehicle Calgary program, also known as Wave Calgary. And it's our centralized dispatch service for on-demand wheelchair accessible taxis. Next slide, please, and that'll be slide 2. So going back, it started in March 2018. Our administration completed a 2-year accessible taxi review along with recommendations. And one of the major objectives of the review was to improve our customer service for individuals who rely on the wheelchair accessible taxis on a daily basis. We found that we were lacking in that area with long waits, maybe the taxi would never show. And then the review results supported proceeding with an approach to implement something called the ATIP program, which stands for Accessible Taxi Incentive Program. And then also our centralized dispatch, Wave Calgary, for on-demand wheelchair accessible taxis. Slide 3. So Wave Calgary vehicles, they're comprised of taxis from all the licensed taxi brokerages in Calgary. We have 5. So Wave Centralized Dispatch dispatches services. It's provided via Wave Calgary app, phone, or the online booking system. At the beginning of each driver's shift, the driver signs on to the Wave Calgary dispatch through the tablet, which is installed in each wheelchair accessible taxi. The closest accessible taxi will be dispatched to the customer's location, and an approximate wait time will be provided. And that puts the customer at ease, so that way they know the vehicle is actually arriving. The amount charged to the customer, it's a regulated taximeter rate. Slide 4. This goes to the Accessible Taxi Incentive Program, and that was implemented January 1st, 2019. And the funded program, a per-trip fee of 10 cents was added to all accessible taxis and private for hire trips, also known as rideshare, taken in our city and licensed to operate. The vendor to provide the services for Wave Calgary, it went through a selection with the Calgary's procurement process and policies. The vendor delivers the day-to-day dispatch services and trains the drivers to use a Wave Calgary tablet. Through the Accessible Taxi Incentive Program, drivers receive incentives for completing accessible taxi trips booked through the Wave Calgary app. Per trip, incentive hours were changed, and the amount increased to $15 for any trip taken between 4 a.m. and 4 p.m., and $25 for any trip on the Wave Calgary platform for 4 p.m. and 4 a.m. That is on top of the taxi meter rate. Yearly incentives are also available to the drivers and the accessible taxi plate holders, and that was also increased. Slide 6. Holders of the Accessible Taxi Plate License, also known as an ATPL, and accessible taxi drivers, they're responsible for ensuring they understand the requirements they must meet to qualify for the yearly, monthly incentives. The drivers are encouraged to contact our office if they require any clarification on the qualifying criteria. Some of the criteria which must be met, they accept all wheelchair accessible trips, the maintenance of the vehicle, and no customer service complaints. The benefits to Wave Calgary: accessible access to all available on-demand wheelchair accessible trips, and you can book via the app, one single phone number, and online web booking. The problems we had in the past were people were waiting for trips, but they'd call 5 different taxi companies and just take the first one, which would lead to vehicles showing up and no customers there. Shorter wait times, we've now seen the average wait time about 15 to 20 minutes, when in the past we heard horror stories about people waiting 45 minutes to a couple hours if the taxi even showed up. And now with the benefits of Wave Calgary, the confidence once a trip's booked, the vehicle will arrive. Benefits to the drivers, they can give back to the community and ensure that same level of service is given because the customers are paying the taxi meter rate. Also, they can earn incentives to help offset the cost of operating a wheelchair accessible vehicle. And within the city of Calgary, we do not charge a yearly renewal for the accessible taxi plate, and we do give free accessible training. Trip volume has increased in accessible trips. You compare the January 2019 pre-pandemic trips to October 2023, we're nearly doubling the trips. Obviously, the pandemic did have an impact on trip volume, and now we're surpassing pre-pandemic levels. We're constantly evaluating the effectiveness of the service, improvements for wheelchair accessible taxis, and the feasibility of continuing the dispatch over the long term. Some of the challenges we're currently experiencing: the cost for accessible vehicles, the supply of the vehicles, and also the move to have zero emission vehicles, so electric or hybrid vehicles, and also the number of accessible vehicles on the road at one time, as a program in the City of Calgary is not mandatory. We do have 189 accessible plates, but approximately 49 to 53 are active on the Wave Calgary platform. We're continuing to have frequent engagement with the drivers who provide the service and our Wave Calgary representatives, and we keep exploring new system updates, data reviews, and we're looking at the opportunity to provide new incentives. Speaking of new incentives, we're in the midst of exploring a wheelchair ramp installation incentive where all holders of a valid subsisting accessible taxi plate could receive up to $25,000 for the ramp wheelchair incentive installation. We found that the installation of the ramp is one of the burdens for people putting new accessible vehicles on the road in Calgary. By having this ramp incentive approved, we're hoping that it'll ensure that the fleet remains up to date and it'll help offset the costs for the drivers so they are encouraged to put new vehicles on the road. This does conclude my presentation at this time. I look forward to any questions and any discussion about Wave Calgary program, and thank you very much for your time.
Corey, thank you very much for your succinct presentation. Covered a lot of ground. We've heard, we've been undertaking public consultations. We've heard quite a bit from Calgary and your model, so appreciate that. I'll open it up to committee members for questions. Janet?
Thank
you. Yeah, introduce yourself, please.
Sure. Hi, Corey. My name's Janet Rutledge. I'm the MLA for Burnaby North. And this is actually quite an inspiring model that you've presented to us. So just a couple of things that I just want to be sure I'm clear about. So in terms of the incentives, well, let's just start with the incentives. Does that come out of municipal finances, municipal budget?
It does not. It's actually a free-flowing fee. So 10 cents per trip for any taxi accessible or the ride share. So it goes into a fund. So any trip that comes in, 10 cents, so it comes from the customer. So that's how the program is funded.
That's what the 10 cents is. Okay.
Right. And as per the bylaw currently, we have the ability to shuffle that to up to 30 cents per trip. But right now we find with the trip volume in our city, we're able to sustain the ATIP fund.
And does that cover the training as well? You said you had free training.
Yes, it does. And so the accessible training we do offer, and that's dealing with people with disabilities, wheelchair securement, and just customer service. And then the broker, they provide supplemental training on their own, and Wave Calgary will provide training on using the dispatch tablet.
Okay. So just on the training, and then I'll hand it off to others who want to ask questions. Sure. So we used to have pre-pandemic, I don't know if that's just coincidental. There was, I think they called it Taxi Host, and it was a lot of it was about providing good service. So does this training, I understand training that is directed towards accessibility and sensitivity and practical things. Does it also include things like just general welcoming to customers?
Oh, absolutely. And we did introduce pre-pandemic online taxi driver. Now it's all vehicle for hire in the city of Calgary, goes through the proper training.
Okay.
And the accessible training is just supplemental to having something called an accessible endorsement. And that's on your livery license, and that allows you to provide the accessible trips. But we do have mandatory training in the city of Calgary.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Shirley?
Good evening, Corey. I'm Shirley Bond. I'm the MLA for Prince George Valemount. So I represent right to the Alberta border, but that would be near Jasper, not as far down. So thank you so much. I'm sure it's past your workday hours, and I know we're really grateful for your input. I've spent some time looking at WAVE because we've been hearing some really significant concerns in British Columbia, and they line up with the concerns that you've actually outlined as the reason, the motivation for moving to WAVE, increased, reducing wait times, looking at reliability of services, and making sure that, there's quality service, whether you are a person with a disability or not. So really appreciate your feedback. I do have a couple of specific questions. First of all, when you speak about, you have been very specific about this being wheelchair accessible. Are persons with other forms of disability, for example, people who are not sighted, or other disabilities, other mobility issues that may not require a wheelchair, how broad is the scope of who gets to use WAVE?
And so for wheelchair accessible vehicles, Wave Calgary, it's actually targeted just for our mobility challenge and wheelchairs, but we do have Calgary Transit Access, who does provide the service for people who are, encountering other disabilities as well. And our regular taxis also provide those service, and our drivers undergo the training to deal with passengers with disabilities.
So you have regular taxis, you have Wave,
Yes.
which is for wheelchair accessible. What was the third one?
It's Calgary Transit Access.
Okay,
And so it's a program through Calgary Transit Access, and they got to be some criteria. The only difference is it's not on demand. So they got to book ahead of time.
Yeah.
And so we found with wheelchair accessible vehicles, our wheelchair accessible vehicles can still take regular trips, but they don't get the subsidy if they are not wheelchair.
so if I had a guide dog, for example, could I use Calgary Transit Access?
You can use any one of our taxis actually, because all of our taxi drivers know that they can't refuse
That's right.
a service animal.
Yes,
And so
same-
we've encountered that a couple times as well. And
Okay.
as per our bylaw, they can't refuse any service animals, but they can use any of our licensed taxis or Calgary Transit Access.
Okay, I appreciate that. I'm interested in the incentives. I'm sorry, I'll cede the floor here in a minute. I do have a number of other questions. I'll see if anyone else has them before I ask the rest. But I do want to just walk through the incentive piece. One question you answered for me was that wheelchair accessible vehicles can actually take other trips. Because I'm sure that not every person yet, although I'm sure you would love to see that, uses Wave. So they can still call a taxi company independently and ask for a wheelchair accessible vehicle. Is that correct?
Absolutely. So we do have 5 taxi brokers in our city. We have 189 accessible taxis. They're all not in service, but the ones that are providing enough service to meet the demand. But they do have the option to call any other taxi brokerage of their choice.
Okay. And my last question, and then if there's more time, I'll come back. I'm very, very interested in the fact that you highlighted, because we are moving through recently approved legislation here in British Columbia. We are moving to zero emission vehicles faster than the rest of the country. And I admit that I had concerns, and I have concerns about that time frame. I think one of the things this committee needs to be aware of and asking questions about is what is the impact on passenger-directed vehicles and taxis, because we are moving very rapidly, and many of these vehicles are not zero emissions. So, are you doing work proactively as the transition is being made across the country, albeit a lot slower than here? What work are you doing to assess the impact on those vehicles?
Great question. I was going to say one of the issues with the wheelchair accessible taxis is I don't believe there's any zero emission vehicles which provide these services yet in North America, just due to the battery size and the ramp installation. All our wheelchair accessible taxis in Calgary are rear entry. And so with the battery and stuff, it would be very difficult. And I'm also worried about the price point for these drivers because they are small business owners, and that's putting a lot of burden on them to get a fully EV, manufactured modified wheelchair ramp. So we're currently exploring other options. We've reached out to Toronto because I know Toronto's pretty aggressive with their ZEV vehicles as well. I think they're looking at 2030. So I believe right now we'd be very aggressive to say 2030 for our limousines and wheelchair accessible vehicles. That might need to be extended a little longer.
Yeah, thank you for that. And that's exactly the time frame we're looking at. And I'm deeply concerned about exactly the things you've identified, the size of the vehicle, the ability to actually deliver that. We have enough challenges now. Can you imagine if we are shrinking the fleet because of that? So thank you for that. And I'll let others ask questions. But thank you so very much.
No worries at all. Thank you.
Doug, go ahead.
I knew if I waited long enough, Billy would ask my question if it made any sense. And but I think there's another aspect to it, like the zero emission piece. There's the hydrogen piece that's coming on that would maybe solve some of that. So I was wondering about that myself in terms of vehicle choice. So like when we have the $25,000 ramp incentive, what is the price range of a ramp installation? And does that incentive serve enough incentive to affect the vehicle choice people make when they enter? the business. And then I'm glad Shirley asked about electric vehicles, but wonder about other forms of motion.
Yeah, great question. So when it comes to the vehicles, the primary accessible vehicles we're seeing on the road are Toyota Siennas and Dodge Caravans. We are seeing other models come in, and the incentive, $25,000 would be the max range, because in Calgary, we allow a vehicle to be a taxi for about 10 years. So you think if someone puts on a 2014 right now, they really only have one more year left. So they wouldn't get the full $25,000. It'd be on a ranging scale. So we are facing some issues there, because if a brand new Toyota Sienna is $70,000, that's still quite a big chunk of change for a new driver to put that money out right away, and not knowing how the current economy is and if things are going to change to fully EV vehicles. So we're facing some challenges there. And also the manufacturers, I don't think there's a lot of vehicles available right now. So there's going to be wait times for these vehicles to arrive and be fully modified. So we're kind of monitoring that with our trip data, seeing if there's, a lull in trip volumes, and seeing if we're hearing more complaints from citizens not getting the service. But we're hoping that with this incentive, once it does get approved, that we'll be able to entice drivers to come back and provide the service for the people that do rely on it.
Okay, thank you. I'll jump in, and I know, Jordan, did you want to go ahead? Corey, thank you. You mentioned in Calgary, all taxi and TNS received driver training, correct?
That is correct. And before the pandemic, it was in person, but we did launch an online training where they have 30 days to do it from the date of initial application to finish the training online.
And the question I have is with respect to your 10 cents a trip for taxi and TNS to full the whole program, including staffing, operation, and incentives. I'm assuming that the wheelchair accessible vehicles are all taxi. Is that correct?
That is correct. We don't have any wheelchair accessible vehicles that are, in Calgary we call them TNCs, but yes, we don't have any yet. But the TNCs are doing their part by 10 cents per trip, and they are helping out with that fund.
Yep. Thank you. I'm going to go Jordan and then Kelly.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Jordan Sturdy, West Van Cedar Sky. How long, sorry, I might have missed it. How long has this program been in place? And how long?
It started as a pilot. Sorry to interrupt. It started as a pilot in 2019, and then it was a 2-year pilot. And then we looked back at the success, and there was no issues with delivery, the service. And so now the RFP, it's going to be up for renewal in 2025.
And where, how many, has the ramp grant been in place the whole time?
It's something new that we're currently exploring. And right now it's just undergoing a privacy impact assessment. And we're hoping that gets approved, by the year end. And that way drivers who are expecting to have vehicles off the road can start looking at putting new ones on and get this subsidy. So it's not in place yet. That's just future next steps. But we're hopefully having it by early December or early 2024.
Was there ever a requirement for the cab companies to have wave vehicles, or how did you get 169 in the fleet?
It's 189. So it started back with a Lahara report way back in the day, and I believe they came to a number that 11%. We have 1,881 taxis in the city, so more than 11% had to be accessible taxis. And we've kind of seen that number drop just due to the cost. And a lot of drivers, were complaining because it's worse on gas, maintenance, the ramp incentive. So by waiving the yearly renewal fee, not offering the accessible training, providing more incentives, we're hoping drivers can, come back to the market, and maybe we'll release more accessible plates in the future.
Just one more question. With tell us about the plate holder incentive. What's that about?
And so the plate holder, because right now it seems like a lot of the plate holders are actually the drivers. So if he has his mechanical done on time, renews his, and there's no cost to renew your plate renewals every June, and the vehicle is in good condition when inspected on the road by one of our officers. They have their straps, they have fire extinguisher, they have a first aid kit, and they meet all their criteria. Just for doing the basic things, the plate holder So that's the person who has a plate in their name. You quite often now they're driver owner operated, just because there's not a huge need for people driving, and there's not really dual drivers on a vehicle right now. And then that way they can get incentives just for meeting the basic criteria.
Thank you.
Kelly?
I'll talk fast. Thanks very much for being here tonight. Just a couple questions. One, the
Sure.
mandatory training, is that annually required, or is that something that's just a one and done?
It's a one and done, and it's upon their first license. And so it has, within the last couple of years, our TNCs have been part of the training program. But before that, if you took the training for a taxi, you were able to drive limousine. And now if you take the training for rideshare, you're eligible to operate taxi as well. You just got to get your taxi license, because there's two separate licenses, but it's only one and done. Or if there's a complaint of serious nature, we do have remedial training, which will have the operator complete.
Thank you for that. That kind of leads into my second question, which is about the driver evaluation form that's part of your slide on customer service complaints. And I'm wondering about the process for customer service complaints, because we've heard from folks that in the community that they don't know what happens to their complaints. They tell the taxi company, but they feel that there's not a lot of accountability because they're protecting their own drivers. So can you explain that for me, please?
In the city of Calgary, we have a 311 system where we do have mandatory bumper stickers on all our taxis saying complaint compliments, please contact 311. It's also on the Wave Calgary webpage, I believe. So we do encourage the drivers to, or any customer, any citizen who does have a complaint, to contact 311, and we will investigate that. We do have pretty good relationships with the taxi brokers, but obviously we like knowing about the complaints, because we do understand that if it goes to the broker, they might not fully investigate it, but our enforcement body will.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.
Shirley?
Just thank you, Chair, for your indulgence. Two other quick questions. How did you get taxi companies to coordinate and to be part of a collaborative process like this?
You know, I think ultimately they had to realize that times were changing and it was very important. And when they heard the horror stories of people not being able to get home from Christmas shopping, having to call an ambulance, or not even, get a ride home and they're stranded for a couple hours, I think they realized that they had to act now. And some of the bigger companies in our city have more accessible vehicles, so they do have more buy-in. But I think drivers realize the opportunity to serve, and that's why they're in this business, to provide a service to the traveling public. And, I think with the incentives, it helps, because everything's going up, and they realize that if they do take these trips, they might as well get rewarded for it.
We've certainly heard about incentives as one of the and if we were to look at another city, would you suggest Toronto?
Toronto, and I know Winnipeg as well. Winnipeg has a similar system, which I think they launched a couple years ago. And if you want to go North America, Chicago as well, because we looked at Chicago's model and we mirrored some of that. And Winnipeg recently launched within the last couple of years, and their WAVE program is similar to ours.
Thanks a ton. We really appreciate it.
I'm going to jump in here. I'm going to jump in here with one last question. That's all right. Now, maybe self-evident. Now, you're the Deputy Chief, Vehicle for Hire, Public Vehicle Standard. So is that the bylaw, like how's that administered with respect to, are you is it the municipal police force? Like how does that piece coordinate?
It's interesting because we have our own designated enforcement body here in Calgary, and we used to be called Delivery Transport Services, post realignment, Vehicle for Hire. So we have peace officers we have 10 designated peace officers who regulate the vehicle for hire industry, taxi, rideshare, and limo. And they do have powers from the province. So it's kind of like sheriffs in BC. We are not police officers, but we work closely with the Calgary Police Service. We do have investigative powers. We do have the Traffic Safety Act on our appointment, so we can do traffic stops. And we have bylaw on our appointment and also provincial appointments from our province.
That's interesting. And so Winnipeg and Toronto and Chicago also have similar enforcement models as well?
I was going to say, in Alberta, it's interesting because Edmonton doesn't. They have general peace officers who look after everything. But in Calgary, we have peace officers for transit. We got peace officers for business licensing. We have our vehicle for hire team. And we also have general bylaw who looks after the waste and untidy complaints, and also our animal complaints as well.
Interesting. Terrific. Okay. So is everybody had her chance? All right. Corey, thank you. We really appreciate it. A great presentation. I think it helps us a lot, and we appreciate all the work you've done, and looks like it's a good model for us to consider in terms of moving forward and really providing that public service. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm going to put my email in the chat, and if anyone has any other questions, please feel free to reach out and we can talk offline. So thank you for your time and have a great night.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Good night.
Bye.
Okay, we've got our next presenter. There we go. Inder Nan from Bel Air Taxi Limited. Welcome. We can see you on the screen. My name is Mabel Elmore. I'm the chair of the committee. And you will have 15 minutes for your presentation, followed by 15 minutes of question and answer from the committee. So over to you. Inder, go ahead.
Thank you for the chair for giving me this opportunity. And my name is Inder Nan. I'm representing Bel Air Taxi, Coquitlam Taxi, and Port Coquitlam Taxi. First of all, thank you for the committee to give us the opportunity to give us a chance to speak on some of our concerns. So I want to start with, first of all, the class 4 license requirement, and which is the requirement for the commercial vehicle and safety of the passenger and for the public. I request committee to please keep the requirement for taxi and for the ride hailing companies. Going on next one, on hours of services, hour of service. As we all know, for the taxi, the hour of service for the driver is 12 hours per shift per day, right? And for the taxi driver, that's include the duty time when he start his shift from signed on to signed off, right? And his shift is include all the wait time also, even he's waiting for his trip or waiting at the YVR for the customer in the wheel. On the opposite side of ride hailing, their hour of service is counted from the trip accept to the completion of that trip. My understanding is this is the violation of hours of service. For example, one of the taxi driver is on duty and waiting for his trips and counts in hour of service, and the other side for the ride hailing drivers waiting for his trip is not included and is not calculated under on duty time, right? My understanding is he may be on road for 18 hours, include the wait time. We don't know about that, right? Another one is on the wheelchair accessible vehicles. I want to bring in the attention of the committee that there is 3 components that cost more to operate a wheelchair vans. First is all vehicle cost, which is the 3 times more than the regular vehicle cost. I would really appreciate if the government can subsidize some part of that vehicle cost, right? The second one is the repair, which is already subsidized by the government, and we request to committee to please continue that. And we are really thank you for that support. Third is driver extra time and fuel somehow if the government can compensate wheelchair bound trips. So on wheelchair bound trips, drivers spend an extra time on wheelchair trips to provide door-to-door service. Most of the trips are short trips, and currently on company end, we are compensate the driver to provide a better service. But sometimes in the busy time on the wheelchair trips, we not have much drivers. We do have a vans, but we don't have the drivers to operate the vans. We are trying to compensate that driver to cover those trips. But it's a long wait time for the wheelchair trips also because of the shortage of the driver. The next one is availability of wheelchair vans. We are trying from last 4 months. We never get a single van from the dealer because of the availability. If we request to dealer to get the van as soon as possible, so they demand $5,000 to $8,000 extra to get the van as soon as possible, which cost way much more, right? And we will really appreciate if government can look on those ones too. Coming on next, the camera cost between the taxi and the ride-hailing companies. Our cost to install the camera is around $1,300 for an approved camera by the Passenger Board of Transportation. Those cameras only can access by the police or the RCMP because they have the special software to assess those cameras, and which is true for the safety of the customer and the passenger. But the opposite side on ride-hailing companies, there is no restriction like that. They can use any kind of camera which is cost up to $200, and anyone can easily assess it. They can reach on that cameras, right? Another one on next one, as a taxi, we have a we have a bar that we can this number of the vehicles we can put on the road by the board, right? But as you know, as per the report by last year on 2022, a ride-hailing company registered 11,500 vehicles, right? Maybe they are not on the road on time, but still they are getting the licenses, right? I would really appreciate if the committee can recommend this one too. Once again, thank you so much. I think I did in my time, and I request you, if you have any question, I'm here to answer as it is my best. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation, Inder. We appreciate it, and I'll open it up. Do we have questions from the committee members? I think, Inder, now you referenced the number of the number of taxis on the road and the numbers of ride-hailing vehicles, and the recommendation. What's your recommendation with respect to those numbers?
Like as per the news, in Ontario, they put a bar on that, right? So only this much can be with the ride-hailing company. They can add the vehicle on that, right? Like there's a certain numbers. Like if they can add only 12,000 vehicles on that, right? But the thing is, the number is going to be increased. But that's I recommend that's under the ride-hailing companies' policies. Who's on the road, who's on the not road, they can cancel it, right? But I don't know how they can tell you that, but I think there should be a bar on that also, that much vehicle can be registered with the ride hailing companies, right?
Thank you. Doug, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation, Inder. I'm very concerned about hours of service and safety issues. And just earlier today, I drove through kind of a roadblock by the commercial vehicle safety enforcement, and they were stopping trucks on each side of the highway, and the inspections were happening. They're underneath the vehicles checking them, and of course, you can't just all of a sudden throw a sticker on your truck and participate in that economy without conforming to conditions. So one of the things around this issue that concerns me is, in that vein, is that this issue of hours of service. And if a taxi driver does a 12-hour shift, then that's it for the day. But are they able to do shorter blocks, or is it from sign on, no matter, there's no, and I should know this, I apologize that I don't know this, but can they take breaks in there and extend that time? It doesn't seem to me that they could.
Yeah, no, thanks for asking and the question. The 12-hour shift time, like we do have a dispatch system, right? So the 12-hour restriction on his ID. So once he sign off, he can't use more than 12-hour his ID. So he can't log in the system. So whenever he's trying to log in, dispatch can see that someone is trying to log in, and it shows him on his screen that your shift hour is completed for the day. So he can't log in.
Yes, could he though, or could anyone do 4 hours, then take 2 hours off, then do 8 hours?
No, most of the drivers, once they start the shift, sometimes at the airport they did, right? But we are not allowed that. On the company end, once they start logging back, once they signed in, then he has to cover his 12-hour shift. So we are monitoring that too, because comes under the passenger safety and the public safety too. But
Yeah.
if it's happened, then that's why the ride hailing companies are the trips count as the hour is count from trip accept to the completion of trip. We don't know from how long he's waiting for that trip. It means maybe he's on the road from 18 hours. We have no idea for that, right? Maybe he's service from 80 hours and he just did the work time, because from trip accept to the trip completion, maybe he done his 10 hours, but
Yeah,
maybe he's on road on 18 hours for that. That's my concern, is it?
that's my concern. Yeah, thank you very much for that.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. Inder, I'd like to thank you for your presentation and your recommendation. We've heard many similar themes as well through our deliberations, so we appreciate that. Thank you very much for taking the time.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, the members too. Thank you so much. Have a good evening. Yeah.
Okay, good evening.
Yeah. Bye.
Okay, and we're going to take a recess until we have to get ready for our next presenter. So Can you hear me? Hello. We're back on air and waiting for our next presenter, Michael Renaud from Tofino Taxi. Was Michael being able to connect? We're having some technical difficulties. Michael, try your mute button. Can't hear you. We still can't hear you, Michael.
There you go. Took a while.
Okay. All right. So we've got some audio. Michael, welcome to the committee. You've got 15 minutes for your presentation, followed by 15 minutes question and answer. My name is Mabel Elmore. I'm the chair, and over to you. Go ahead.
Yes, sorry for the making you wait. I somehow got this confused for another day. Mike Renault, Janice and I, we have a small mom and pop operation in Tofino. I have been driving the taxi here for about 20 years. We've owned it for about 17, 18. It has been a good business to have. It's a great job if you like meeting people, and sorry, I'm just a little befuddled. I don't like talking in public that much. However, the reason I'm calling is we have been dealing for the last couple of years since COVID with a downsize in business. It has slowly been shrinking. Also, now they have the rideshare operation going into Tofino, which is cut into business even more. My problem is I would like to see a little bit more of a level playing field between the two of our companies. I run on a meter, and regardless of how busy I am, you pay what's on the meter. They have a little bit more of a edge where they can surcharge if they're busy. Because of the way things are set up, it's a hard business to run now. I mean, it's almost like we're being turned into like a dinosaur. We're going to be extinct eventually. Passenger transportation just this year gave us a increase.
Michael, we're just having a little bit difficulty hearing you. Can you try and speak into the mic, into your microphone, and speak up? We'll see if if you can get through a little bit better. Can you try that?
Is that a little bit better?
It's a little bit better. Yep. Try speak right into the microphone and
Okay.
speak louder.
Yeah, sorry. Like I said, well, I have my wife with me now. Hold on 1 second. Hi, honey, can you hear me? Yeah. Okay, I'm on with the legislative assembly right now. Oh. Can I call you back? Yeah. All right, bye. We've given our heart and soul into this. 20 years ago, we took all our savings, bought the company. We've given up a lot. We've worked very hard. We have 3 cabs, 3 licenses. And we're in a town of 12 that swells close from 12 to 1,600 over the year. And I find it's getting harder and harder to keep doing what I'm doing. Can you hear me all right?
You're fading, Michael, you're fading.
I'm sorry.
Michael, are you there?
I'm still here, yeah.
Okay, that's better, that's better. There we go.
All right, well, I'm gonna have to turn this thing sideways so I can speak right into the speaker.
You're on your phone, right, Michael? You're speaking on your phone?
No, on my tablet.
On your tablet, okay.
Yeah.
Your hand, maybe your hand is on the microphone?
Not that I know of. No, I have the microphone right in front of me.
Okay.
Anyway, like I was saying, I would like it to be a little bit more of a level playing field. You know, it took me 8 to 10 years to even get an extra cab, you know, from passenger transportation. I don't know. I just,
I hear what you're saying, Michael. Is there anything else you wanted to convey, or you want us to start asking some questions?
just ask questions. I can probably answer them a lot better than I'm doing.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's
Yeah.
good. We got a good idea. You've been in the business for 20 years, and you've got 3 cars now, if I understand, and two licenses. You and your wife have really invested in the company and been impacted by the introduction of the ride hailing in Tofino. So I'd like to open it up. Does anybody from the committee have questions that you'd like to ask? I can start. Michael, now how long has the ride hailing been operating there? And do you know how many vehicles are operating?
Right now, I think they have 3. They started about 3 years ago. They were originally Whistle, but Whistle has sold it to Caboo. And they're running from Tofino, and from what I understand, you fuel it too. But they can have as many cars as they wish. If they can get 5 drivers, they can have 5.
And how many drivers do you have with you, Michael?
Well, I can have up to 3 or 4.
And how many do you have now?
Just 2.
2. Okay, got it.
Yeah, it's this part of the season slows right down.
Right. And then I guess it picks up in the summer. Gets busier in the summer.
It starts about May long weekend.
Yeah.
And runs pretty steady straight through to the end of September.
Right. Okay, I've got a question from Kelly Green. Go ahead, Kelly.
Hi, thank you so much for presenting to us. I'm very interested to hear about your experience in smaller communities. I was wondering about, we hear in urban centers that the taxi companies are using apps, and so they're much more similar from a customer perspective in terms of booking a ride to compared to like Uber or Lyft or whatever. Do you use apps? And no, and so you have like a call center to dispatch, or?
I am the dispatcher, yeah.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much for helping me with that.
No problem. Unfortunately, what the problem we have out here, especially in a very small urban rural
Michael, you're fading a bit. Are you holding onto your tablet? I think you might be covering your tablet, your microphone.
I'll try again.
There, that's better. That's better.
Okay. Anyway, out here, cell reception is middle of the road at best, and Wi-Fi is worse. So it's kind of hard to get anything that works on Wi-Fi. There's too many dead areas.
Right, yep, I understand that. I've got another question now from Janet Rutledge.
Yes, thank you, Michael. My name's Janet Rutledge. I'm the MLA for Burnaby North. And you had mentioned that we should level the playing field. Do you, can you give us any concrete ideas of what you think might make it fairer for you with the advent of ride hailing? What rules should?
I think if you fix the rate on both, like my rates are fixed. It doesn't matter if it's Grey Cup, New Year's, Christmas. You pay what I pay. You pay what it's on the meter. That never changed. Also, I think, like if you have a town that Garson, there should be a limited number of cars allowed to work it.
Okay.
Now, you were saying that there's a not very good cell reception or Wi-Fi reception? So are the so how are the ride hail, are they using apps or
Well, they use an app. Yes, they have an app, and then it goes to their cell phone. But depending on where they are with their cell phone,
okay,
they don't get the message.
okay.
You know.
All right.
Yes, okay.
Also, one of the other problems I have is when you have a cab, you log in, you log out,
Right,
right? While you're logged in to log out, I have to pay a minimum wage of $16.75 an hour.
right.
Where the guys in the ride share, if they're not working, they could be still sitting in their car. They only get paid by the ride.
Right. Okay.
Okay.
Got it. Thank
All
you.
right.
Thank you.
Okay, Shirley, go ahead.
Good evening, and thank you so much, Michael, for your presentation. Just a question about persons with disabilities, and you obviously, live in a part of the province where that might be more challenging, and you have a small company. Can you just tell me how that works where you live? Are there challenges with providing service that is inclusive and accessible?
Well, we don't have any handicap capable cabs, if that's what you're asking. However, I have on several occasions helped people in wheelchairs into my car and put their equipment in the back. But we've never had anything more intense than that.
Thank you.
All right, okay. Michael, I want to thank you for taking the time, and we're just very pleased that you were able to join us. I understand there was some confusion in terms of the dates and times, so we really appreciate it. And I just want to echo, it's important. We've heard from a number of cab companies, taxi companies, but from the larger urban centers. And so, we're very pleased to hear from you and Tofino Taxi and your experience in the area. So thank you very much for joining us and sharing your perspective. We appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah. Again, I apologize. I planned on it being a lot more polished. However,
Michael, I think you came. Michael, I think you came across, clearly and really got your issues down, and we have a good understanding in terms of. You gave us your historical perspective of setting up and the impact with your experience with ride-hailing vehicles. So, I think we got a pretty good picture of what you're trying to get across. So, you did a good job.
all right. Well, thank you very much, and have a lovely night.
Okay, good night. Thank you.
Good night.
Bye.
Okay, so that concludes our official presentations today. I'll take a motion to go in camera. We have some conversations. Move second. All those in favor, all those opposed. Okay. back. So we've concluded our deliberations and our presentations today. I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn. So moved, second. All those in favor, all opposed, and we're adjourned. Thank you.